Well, thank you to Jeff Harvey and the Channel 9 Orchestra for that magnificent intro music. This is the Titus and Sergio Variety Hour podcast. I'm Sergio Paradise, and I'm joined by a bloke who fair dinkum, he looks like he's just gone 8 rounds with Dane Swan, and that's because he has. It's Titus O'Reilly.
Oh, good morning, Serge. I had a great Saturday night. Thank you to everyone who came along and saw us me interview Dane Swan. We had 2 shows on the night, both sold out.
4 stars in the paper.
Yeah, I wrote that review myself. And so, no, it was good fun. And Dane at one point brought out at the start as a bit of a joke, we filled up a whole crate of beer,
Right,
like a bucket
of
of ice with about 20 beers in them. And as a prop, he came on stage carrying them. Except I don't think he knew
sort
it was. He knew it was a
podcast.
Yeah. And he basically drank them in the first. So it was quite an interesting night. So, but anyway, it's good fun. Thanks to everyone who came down. I'm also doing Sydney Comedy Store on the 21st of April. So if you want to come on, tickets are selling quite fast for that. So that's just me doing that one. No Swanee, no Surge this time.
No, we'll be doing
your
our tour
visa
later
didn't
this
clear.
year.
But we should get straight to our guest.
Well, we're very honoured to have him with us in the on the Variety Hour. He's a true comedy colossus, a world-renowned stand-up comedian, a Logie Strength TV host, a man whose Melbourne Comedy Festival shows are so popular that some of them are in Sydney. Please make him welcome the one, the only, the great Wil Anderson.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. By the way, this is the deepest my voice has ever been, partly because I've got a little bit of a cold, but partly because you two both have such deep voices. That I figured that your podcast technology wouldn't be able to record Serge's level at the low level and my normal high level. It just... So I've come down to your level.
Okay.
I'd like to consider this as like Carlton and Essendon, and the rain has brought our voices together.
All to the same level. It's and then Serge's voice is ridiculously deep, and we've talked about before. He was almost
it's been like this
voice.
since I was a kid. I mean, well, not quite this bad, but I this is true. I still remember at primary school. Remember every Christmas you'd have everyone be in the choir and you do carols. I remember we were rehearsing one year, and there was the teacher. There was something wrong that she couldn't hear, and she walked past every kid slowly. And then when she got to me, she just stopped pointing and said, "You mime from now on. You just mime." And I was 8. I was 8 years old.
Yeah, isn't that the Australian way? Don't stand out. Just keep everything exactly the same.
I'm sure Silent Night needed some bass.
Yeah, I mean, obviously your choir teacher was from the Ross Lyon School of Role Players.
That's right.
Yeah. You're going to be the Zach Dawson of this choir from now on, if you could just mime down the back.
Did you know that one of the things that Serge's claim to fame was almost becoming the voice of... Remember that show Bob Morrison with the talking dog? The one that lasted...
Oh, you're going to be the voice of Bob?
Well, he auditioned for
the
it.
The producer, he said, you've got a sort of booming voice. Why don't you audition to be Bob? And I did. And then he pulled me aside after and said, well, actually, Bob's a sort of sparky little white terrier. You sound like a bloodhound just lying on the couch. And it ain't going to work.
Yeah, if we're going to ever do Bob Morrison uncut, this is the voice we'll use.
The Boogie Nights version.
So we should start off because just because of the timing. Yesterday we heard some terrible news that John Clark had passed away, and he was a hero of mine. Will, I think you posted some nice tributes about him too. Did you know him well?
No, not well. I knew his work intimately.
Yeah.
Like many Australians, I grew up, watching John Clark, through the Fred Dagg stuff, like listening to recordings of that. But obviously, his political satire stuff that he did. I mean, if you look at worldwide, what Jon Stewart and John Oliver and all these guys are doing, John Clark was doing that sort of informed style of comedy even before that, and was still doing it to a quality level. 68 years old, it's way too soon, but he was still, that was the great thing about diving deep on it, when it happened, was going back over these old clips, but then watching some of the more recent ones that perhaps I wasn't as up to date with, and just realising the standard of them was still as high as the ones from 10 years ago. And I found a couple as well for sports fans. Like, you can go to my Twitter page for it because I posted it, or just Google John Clark, Clark and Dorr, Lara, who is Lara Bingle?
Oh, yeah, I saw that yesterday.
John Clark trying to explain to somebody why the Michael Clark and Lara Bingle story is important, and it is it's 10 years out of date, and I was seeing it for the first time, and it made me laugh so hard.
I have a friend who worked with him back in the ABC days, and they rang me yesterday because I knew they were close friends and we were having a chat about him, and I never met him. And they were telling me this story about they used to swim at the same pool, some local council pool.
He was a big swimmer, John.
Yeah, big swimmer. And one day this guy's swimming along and there's one other swimmer in the pool and it's John Clark, and he swims up and he says, and there's no one else there, and he says, what a terrific underutilisation of a community funded facility. And that's just how he talked.
You can hear him say that.
Like, it was just he wasn't on, and he was just saying it to be just, that's how we talked in real life.
In the comedy community, I think we felt this one, particularly hard. He was one of those people who was famous for helping. He was one of those people who was famous for a lot of the time helping without any credit. Yesterday, the thing that I found remarkable was not just the sort of big names who shared stories, but across my Facebook page where, I follow pretty much all the comedians in Australia, I was hearing stories from people who would be considered much more sort of low level or not well-known people who had their own story about how John Clark had helped them. And to me, that was almost the greatest tribute to the man that I discovered yesterday, which was the idea that, of course, the public, we all loved him for the quality work he did for so long. And of course, when these things happen, the higher end people always have a story to share. Yeah. But the thing that I loved was all these sort of more unknown people who had their own stories. I thought that was amazing.
I think the thing I liked about him too is everything he did was both clever and he managed to do satire without, which is, it's always hard when you're walking.
Beating you over the head with it,
Yeah, and also it's hard to do satire and not be really mean in a way. And he just seemed to find a knack of not doing that. Even his victims seemed to like him. It reminded me a bit of, this year with Don Rickles, they also said that people liked to be insulted with him, and John Clark couldn't be more different, but he did that satire that half the tribute to people that he made look quite foolish, exactly. which is a rare skill.
When I used to work on Sale of the Century, remember we used to have those really lame celebrity challenges? We used to record Sale often on a Friday in the big studio at Channel 9, and we'd see John and Brian Dorr come in to do their spot for a current affair. And often John would just lurk in the back of a studio watching Sale being recorded. And my boss was always at me, you've got to get John Clark for one of these celebrity challenges. And of course, John wouldn't have a bar of it. I went up to him one Friday and I said, John, we've got to get you on one of our celebrity challenges. And he said, I wouldn't answer a question. I said, I'll turn it up, you kill it. And he said, I didn't say I wouldn't know the answers. Yeah. I just said I wouldn't answer the question. I said, okay, we'll just put a line through it now. It was just even something as lame as that, he just made funny, and he was such a warm, gentle guy and generous. One
of his great skills was, because I live half my year in America now, and so it's been 4 of the last 8 years, and it's one of the most amazing things about that experience is I travel right across the country and you find out what Americans identify as being Australian, and often there are weird cultural touchstones that are disproportionate to how big they were here. So, for example, Yahoo Serious clearly made a much huger impression in America than has people still ask about Yahoo Serious everywhere you go in America. What's he up to?
You don't know much about him here, you're right.
No, I've done some research and I still can't find out that much about him. No, but the other one is they bring up the clip of did you see the Australian politician who was explaining about the front of the boat falling off? Right. And because what had happened in America was that clip went around America as people pass it around as this is an Australian politician answering these questions. And people to this day still remember that as being a real thing.
The greatest tribute for satire is when, and this happens, you see, it happens with The Onion, happens with all, when people think it's real. Yeah. It's so spot on. And that one is just, they do another one where he explains the financial crisis. I don't know if you saw that one. It was one fairly recently, and he's just explaining, they do it in a very deadpan, this broke country borrowed money from this broke country, and it's all about how to refinance, they're all borrowing more money from making all of them broker, basically, and does this on and on. It gets sillier and sillier. And all in the comments are people going, well, this is outrageous that this is how...
this is how they politicians work.
It's just furious anger, and people have just read it completely wrong, So he's just a master at that. And you just hope you can kind of get close to a career like that if you can churn out that quality that regularly.
Or the great Tony Martin tweeted yesterday that John Clark was always the best bit of whatever he was in, or words to that effect. And that pretty much summed him up. And it was like a lot of the news services last night were showing that great clip from the games with the 100 metres track. And like I suggested on Twitter that, you know, with all due respect, his funeral procession should be about 100 metres long.
94 metres.
94.
94.
And that just summed up the genius of that show and John. And I watched it again a couple of times yesterday, and I must have seen it 100 times, and I still laughed out loud.
Yeah.
Well, Tony made the really good point, actually, and you know, he's one of the people who is very qualified to make that point because he's another guy you could put in these sort of conversations. Yeah. But Tony made the point of, you know, that sort of mockumentary style that has become so prevalent again was something that sort of John was, you know, kind of nailing before a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because it predated The Office, didn't it? It was like way back, you know.
Yeah.
Like
it was 1999 or 98.
Yeah, that's right. It was true.
I must admit, if you're talking about his cameos in other things, to prove Tony Martin's point, one of my favourite ones to revisit is his appearance on Frontline. I don't know if you can remember that, where they're trying to recruit him over to do Frontline, but they are pitching to him that the trick will be they'll get him to dress like the characters. And it is one of the most brilliant little crossover bits. It's a really wonderful bit.
And he and Brian Dorr in that bit, they don't say a single word for the whole thing. And they've got the EP pitching this to them. And then at the end of the pitch, they both just look at their watches. And that's it. They don't say a word. And you still laugh out loud.
Now, we'll move on to, because you've been, one thing I enjoyed a lot watching the Bulldogs win the premiership last year, one, being a Melbourne supporter, it gave me a sense that miracles do and can happen. And we've had Danny McGinlay on quite a lot, but watching you and him basically publicly celebrate this from afar, and Serge and I were saying, that could one day be us, which it probably won't be. We're both Melbourne supporters. How did you become a Bulldog supporter? Because you didn't grow up in the western suburbs, did you? You grew up in the country?
Yeah, unless you consider East Gippsland the western suburbs.
You're the complete wrong side of the state.
You are going the wrong direction. But we were a Bulldog zone.
That's how the connection.
When I played schoolboys footy and stuff, we always played in the Bulldogs colours. So we were there was a Bulldogs area, but no one I knew barracked for the Bulldogs. My dad is a Geelong fan.
Right.
And he was the first person in his entire family. My grandfather had a big family, and all the kids and then all their grandkids are all Collingwood supporters. We were a massive, massive Collingwood family. My dad was the only one who didn't barrack for Collingwood. He barracked for Geelong. And so he told us when we were kids, the grandparents would try to convince us we were Collingwood fans.
Right.
But he said to us, he said, no. He said, you're going to follow this team for the rest of your life. You should get to choose which one that you get to follow. And so every single person in my family, my sister barracks for St Kilda, my brother barracks for Essendon, and I barracked for the Bulldogs. We all chose our own teams.
It's a remarkably mature thing from a family member, as far as...
I've got to be honest with you.
Is it even legal?
Well, yeah. I've got to be honest with you. There was a few times when Geelong were not only winning premierships, but also playing the most entertaining football in the entire league, where I was like, could you have not just forced me to barrack for Geelong, Dad, so I could be happy, you know? But I had a friend when I was younger called Jason McCain, his name was, and I remember it really well because I saw him again on grand final day last year. We had not seen each other in probably 20 years.
Oh, really?
And we both ran into each other at the grand final. But he was a Bulldogs fan. He was a year older than me. And we used to sit in the car after junior footy. You know, we go and watch the seniors play, and we'd sit in the car all day because it's a country, you know. Yeah. Hayfield was Hayfield was a town about 1,000 people, and that's where I played junior footy and stuff. Hayfield Kangaroos. And then we'd stick around for the seniors and stuff. So Jason and I'd sit in the car and watch the footy and listen to the Melbourne games on the radio. And
3KZ is football.
Yeah. So we'd just be, I know, it would have been...
it's not that old.
ABC. Because we were country, it was ABC.
Only
the ABC. Yeah. That's all you could get down there was the ABC. And so we grew up watching that, and he was a Bulldogs fan. So I thought, maybe the Bulldogs. Maybe my friend barracks for them, so I'll barrack for the Bulldogs. And it was kind of cemented when we had some players coming to visit the school. So we had a bunch of Bulldogs players come down maybe when I was 10, 11, 12, something like that. And Magic McLean, Brad Hardy, and that was the time where I was like, okay, I've gone from sort of saying I barrack to the Bulldogs to being like... I'm all in. Yeah. So, and then forever it was just mostly disappointing.
I was about to say, it's sort of like choosing a curse or something for a long period. Like the heartache the Bulldogs have had.
I had to retire this joke after last season, but the way I used to describe it to people was if I had wanted to watch the replay of our last grand final, all I would have had to do was wait another 2 years until television came to Australia. So it was heartbreaking for a long while, and because I've loved them, like, you know, I'm a bit all in with this sort of stuff. Like, I love AFL footy in general, but I love the Bulldogs, and you know, there were some great years, but you know, really sort of 97 around that time, like, just really, like, my heart started to break. And then when GWS and Gold Coast came in a couple of years ago, and we were without a coach, a CEO, our captain had gone to GWS, and I was like, Libba was out for a year with his knee. He'd been our best player, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm healthy enough to live long enough for them to win a premiership. You know?
And when because you live half the year in the US, so is that footy season, or you tend to be
some
home?
of it is.
So you got a bit of crossover of thing. So you got to come back for the big game sort of thing.
Well, put it this way. This is the optimism of a Bulldog supporter. I went to the Hawthorn game at the G in the finals last year, and at the end of that game, everyone's like, oh my God, you live in Sydney? And they're playing in Sydney next week. You can go down the road from your house and watch them play. It's easy for you to go to the football. And I said, it won't be that easy, because I'll be in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles Podcast Festival, because I did not think I would need to have this weekend free.
the sheer joy of winning the flag, when it got to that like 25, 26 minute mark of the last quarter, when you knew you had it won. What was, this is just something we can dream about. Was it a feeling of euphoria, or just sheer joy, or were there tears? I mean, we've watched all the footage, and I'm just jealous, quite frankly.
The thing I will say is I took my friend Charlie, who I do my footy podcast with, and he's a St Kilda fan, and I've been there with him on some grand final days where it's gone the other way. Yeah. And he had the presence of mind, because I can't really remember much of those last 3 or 4 minutes, but he had the presence of mind to get out his phone and film what I was going through, so I've been able to watch it back and sort of see it. But there was a moment I can really remember. So when the Joe Anderson goal was overruled, everyone who's a Bulldogs fan, we all just turned to each other and went, yeah, okay, well, this is how they ruin us. This is it. This is it. This is how it always works. Yeah. It's like Libba's goal against Adelaide. This is it. We're done. We had a crack. We almost won the grand final. We'll go back to being rubbish. The dream is over. And then that moment that I would just, for me, remember forever. You know, Dale Morris with his broken back tackling Buddy in the middle, and Tom Boyd grabbing that ball and wobbling that goal. For me, then, I was like, we're going to win this. That Tom Boyd goal, I was like, we're going to win this. Yeah. And my friend Shane Delia, who I go to the footy a bit with, and he's a dyed-in-the-wool Bulldogs fan as well, there's about 2 minutes before the end, Charlie shot this thing of me just whispering in his ear, we're going, the Bulldogs are the premiers. And it was... Like, there's part of me that thinks that when the Joe Anderson goal got disallowed, I fell to the ground, hit my head, and I've been in a coma since then.
You're not sure if it's all really happened.
Yeah. But I was sitting next to... So I did a gig for the Sydney Swans on that morning. So they had a big function on, and they had a few players get up and speak, and so I got up and did like a bit of comedy for him, well, alleged comedy, and walked across the ground. So I got to the ground quite early, and so we're still about an hour away from this game starting, and I'm sitting next to a Bulldog supporter, and it was a guy, a husband and wife. They would have been about 60. The guy looked like he'd run a marathon, and we're still an hour out from the league. I was like, I actually bought him a beer, because I was like, mate, you're going to die. And he's like, I just cannot handle this. And he was just all throughout, I was sort of riding his emotions, and like, it's a fully grown man, and I only can relate because I would do exactly the same. 1 minute he's almost in tears, next minute he's all, and then he just completely broke down when the final siren went, was just sobbing, you know, and just so happy. And this Swan supporter behind me taps him on the back, and I think, oh, here we go. This is, you know, and he goes, enjoy it, mate. I remember when we won our first one. And it was just like, what other sport does that happen in? You know what I mean? It's just...
I love that about that. I mean, the Swans fans were so generous.
They stayed till the end, didn't they? They stayed, like, they didn't leave, like, the minute it sort of happened.
They had a week they did not deserve. Like, I mean, honestly, Sydney were the best team in the competition last year.
Yeah.
Sydney are a team that everybody admires for the way they go about it. They're hard and tough, but they're also skillful and entertaining. You know, they play the game in the right way, you know.
Yeah.
They had... I've been to the grand final a lot. I've been lucky enough over the years to go a lot. And I decided I wouldn't wait for my team to be in the grand final to go. So... I've never heard a more one-sided crowd on grand final day.
Yeah, and it was the loudest grand final I've been to.
The loudest and the most one-sided.
Yeah.
Like, it was, the Bulldogs had a home game on grand final day. Which
I know a lot of people
very
who said
rare.
the same thing who weren't Sydney or Bulldog supporters, but just were there and they said this was a Bulldogs home thing. And it was like, you could feel that in Melbourne the week of the grand final. If you weren't, you know, if you're obviously you're a Bulldog supporter, but if you barracked for any other team other than Sydney, everyone wanted the Bulldogs to win that game, and it was reflected at the ground on the day.
It was sort of a reverse Collingwood in the grand final, basically.
I mean, well, we've been everybody's second team forever, and everyone always says that, the Bulldogs are my second team, and I go, yeah, because you have no bad memories of us beating you in anything important. That's why you like us. I don't want to be your second team. Yeah. I want you to hate thinking about it.
Well, it's like Hawthorn. Everyone's like, you know, thrilled that Hawthorn suck all of a sudden.
Yeah, and we all jump on quickly on Hawthorn because we know in about 3 years they'll be back, so we have to enjoy it while it's happening.
Really get in. Because Hawthorn supporters say to me, oh, hang on, I had that really tough 3 years in the 90s. I'm like, what? I would give my life to
They won 5 flags in the 80s, 90s, and then 3 more back to back. You know, don't come to us with your
But they are amazing. But
I mean, Hawthorn's the sort of club where they're like, oh, poor Shane Crawford, he only won 1 flag.
He's seen as you guys have Bob Murphy, and they putting Shane Crawford up as, he only played in 1. That was a moment where Bevo handed over the medal to Murphy was amazing at the ground too, because afterwards it became a lot of people sort of went, but at the time it was a genuine moment. We didn't know it was going to happen.
I mean, for me, this is Charlie and I talk about this a bit, but because like for what I love about football, which is the stories of football, you know, I'll take the story any day over everything else, you know. And for me, to have followed this team for so long, for them to have constantly sort of fallen at the final hurdle, you know, to have such a season where, you know, the captain goes down in round 3, where we have this like incredible run with injuries, and yet it doesn't set them back. They go over to Western Australia in the first late final. They've never won an interstate final, and they win that. So that's history for us. We come back to play Hawthorn at the MCG. We haven't won 2 finals in a row since 61 or something like that. Ridiculous. Anyway, we win there. Then
that was a cracker of a night. That crowd that night.
I mean, that was an amazing game.
People were...
I mean, that moment too when like Bontempelli, you know, stripped Hodge in the middle of the ground, you just felt like this is something, we're on here.
Yeah.
And then the GWS game, all that was history for us. All that was a great story. You know, all of it was part of this myth. But to cap it off with that moment of like something that very much summed up both Luke Beveridge and the reason that he got the players together, that sort of thing is the very reason he'd been able to band these sort of players together in that way. But the second thing was, what I loved the most as a Bulldogs fan is this victory was for, like, you see the players around, Chris Grant and Rowan Smith and like Jono on the boundary line and Gian Syracuse and all these guys, they're involved in this. They're being celebrated as part of it. Liver's back supporting his kid. They're in the crowd being embraced by the club. You got Doug Hawkins helping, you know, raise the flag. This is a victory for the Bulldogs' history, and all of them can feel like they were part of getting there. But what I love about that moment the most is, as a performer, I still see the performer in him in that moment, because he does that thing, because he's said that he asked if he could do it or not, right? Yeah. So he has the moment where he turns away just slightly and then comes back, like Columbo style. One
it's
more
like something
thing.
out of the WWE or something. You're like, I'll just pause for
one more thing, and then some intro music starts, and then suddenly Bob Murphy starts coming down from the crowd.
It was like he could see the monitor, the TV monitor, and it just thought, now's the time to do it. You're right. It was a performance, but it still didn't. That doesn't take anything away from the magic of that moment, because we're watching it at home. And I had friends there, and none of us barracked for the Bulldogs. But my mate's wife, when Bevo handed over the medal, she said, "I think I'm going to cry." And my mate said, "Okay, who needs a beer?" And that was because I reckon there was a couple he was about to cry too. And we don't even barrack for the Bulldogs. That's how big an impact that had.
But I had to interview Bob Murphy for Channel 7 for something that hasn't gone there yet. And I said to him, the next morning you gave it back to him and then he gave it to the museum. Did you start to think he just doesn't want the bloody medal? Yeah. He's just giving it away to people. Yeah, like what's wrong with it?
So I'll get a few more. It'll be fine.
That's right. But it's funny what you say about it's a win for all the the history of the club and all the ex-players that came because some of them, as you would know better than me, came so close.
Yeah.
It's not the same as when you see Brereton and Dunstall celebrating another Hawthorn premiership on the sidelines, is it? Because you kind of go, those blokes have already had more success than most clubs. Right. So, it doesn't quite run the same way.
I introed Dermot at a lunch a while ago and I said, 5-time premiership player Dermot Brereton. And he first goes, 5 daytime and 5 nighttime, thanks, Serge. I said, yeah, okay. I stand corrected, Dermot.
On the Friday night before the game, I was doing AFL 360, did a live, thing, and I was walking there and they'd set up all the cups. They had the big display of and so, some of them, they're full of cups and then the Bulldogs just one lonely cup. And I happened to be walking there and I bump into Dipper. And so Dipper and I are just walking along having a chat as we walk over to the broadcast. And he looks at the Bulldogs one and just goes, I've got more than that in my cupboard.
You both have to laugh and want to punch him. It's like, really?
Not in his memories, not his history, in his cupboard. He's got 5 cups.
There wasn't enough room at the club anymore, so it's in storage somewhere. That's so good. So this round, are you tipping this year? My tipping's terrible after the last round.
So I got 9 round 2.
Yeah, so did I. I was like,
got a little confident about how good I was at predicting football, and then.
Crashed and burned last week. Everybody did.
Well, I mean, this is this was if you want to have an AFL round, it's all best bets are off round, isn't it? I mean, it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it for football. I didn't like it as a Bulldogs fan. Obviously.
What happened there? I was watching it. It just looked like you
obviously
guys...
Freo at Freo, our bogey team.
And they're the powerhouse that is Freo.
It's the last time we lost a game of football, August 26th. It was the longest I'd ever gone not having lost a game of football.
Yeah, were you like, hey, what do I do again?
Brilliant. I was like, I don't know how this feels anymore. It did make me worry a bit. Only that I didn't think that we'd played that well in the first 2 rounds.
No, I didn't think either.
But I was really happy that we were winning regardless of the fact that we weren't kind of playing well. I mean, the thing that everybody says is the teams that played deep into the finals come back and you want to be good at the right time of the year.
Yep.
And I think there's got to be a bit of the Bulldogs that think, let's take our time to get this right and we will have the confidence that if we can finish in the 8, we can win from anywhere in the 8 after last year. But it was a good wake-up call, I reckon. It was about the right time.
It was the loss you had to have.
Yeah. Felt like one of those ones that I was like, as long as we don't play Freo in the finals, which feels like it won't happen.
I think you might be right there.
I'm worried you've reawakened Freo, but I did also think that taking Zach Dawson out of the team is like bringing 5 stars into the team.
I think you're being kind to Zach Dawson. Felt like they're playing with 36. But, yeah, I mean, I think this is like, having Zach Dawson in the team is kind of like, when they do that training on sand dunes and they've got a tyre behind them.
and a parachute attached to them
right,
too.
But eventually you're meant to take the tyre off so that you can run faster. Now they've taken the tyre off.
That's a good theory. They just forgot. Yeah. Oh, we left it.
We left Zach. Oh, the handbrake's been on the whole time. No wonder it took us 12 hours to drive.
He's still on the list.
That is the weirdest thing because I've never known a guy who's been so kind of called for years now. Like every team's got their whipping boy to an extent, but
he's the entire industry's whipping boy.
That's right. No one's ever believed for ages.
Yeah, I think he's one of those. I mean, like, he's played over 200 games of AFL football, right?
Yeah, he's better than any of us, of course. But
he's also better than a lot of people who've ever played the game, clearly. But he's definitely from that Ross Lyon viewpoint of you need 5 or 6 star players and then everybody else are just meat puppets to get it to them. So.
That's right. That's basically it. The other one is Hawthorn looked awful. Did you see that?
I watched a bit of the first half and I watched it up to half time and I'm thinking, they've got to get out of second gear pretty pretty soon here, but the Gold Coast looked far quicker and far more on song at half time. And then I saw the scores afterwards. I thought, gee, that is just as bad a half of football as Hawthorn's played in probably 20 years. But they got smashed. But everywhere.
Terrible.
They look slow.
And I just
Jack Gunston hasn't kicked a goal in 3 games.
Well, the social media reaction alone was sort of worth it. Like, that's the most joy since probably the Bulldogs one I've seen on social media around it.
I mean, everybody's been waiting. We've been waiting so long for this to happen.
Yeah.
And they kind of managed to disguise it last year, I reckon, because they won like 10 games by under a couple of kicks.
Yeah.
And what Hawthorn was so good at last year was if they were close enough by the end, they had all that experience and stuff to get them across the line. But I feel like now they're just not close enough to even put the sort of pressure of being Hawthorn on teams.
They're very slow too.
I mean, is it too much to say Zach Dawson style that the curse of Tyrone Vickery looms large?
There was plenty of that.
I mean, the fact that, Richmond are 3 and 0 and that Hawthorn is 0 and 3.
I just love that Vickery's become the complete, the ability to... He's probably the most important player in the AFL in that he can shift whole 2 teams' records single-handedly.
Mate, he's like that William H. Macy movie, The Cooler.
Yeah.
About the guy in Vegas who comes to people's tables when they're on a hot hand.
That's right.
That's what Ty Vickery is of the AFL. They've got to send him up to GWS, see if they can get 40 number 1 draft picks around Vickery.
Here's the equalisation policy in personified, basically. Just send him around.
Well, maybe that's what, they argue. If GWS can keep their academy, but in return they've got to get Vickery and play him every week.
And they say, no, we'll just get rid of it.
It's fine, we'll get rid of the academy. We're fine.
Would you like Kohler back too? What else do you want back? You got to say that you wouldn't have picked at the start of the year Richmond 3-0, although I reckon it's a soft 3-0 at the moment. I haven't seen them.
I'm happy that Richmond are 3-0 because it will make their inevitable fall even sweeter. Because it's the Tigers. They will stuff it up somehow at some point.
We have a way we describe the way Richmond play on our podcast, which is called So Richmondy. And so in any scenario, you've got to work out what the most Richmondy response to that scenario will be. Now, traditionally in the past, this is perfectly set up for your perfect Richmond. 3 strong games at the start. Then you play Brisbane, a team that no one expected to win any games. Round 4, you lose. So Richmondy. But I feel like this year they're building to something even a bit more Richmondy.
Even more so than that.
Richmonding it up. One of those classic Richmondy years where they, get beaten by a team that actually finished 9th. Like a proper Richmondy team. Yeah,
that was one of my favourite moments in the AFL history where they lost a final to a team that didn't make the finals.
Yeah. Or
how do you even do that?
It feels like one of those years where, Cochrane picks the wrong way to kick into the breeze. That sort of year. It feels like there'll be a big Richmondy result at the end.
They've been good though, but I mean they haven't really. I wouldn't have picked the Swans being 0-3 either. That's kind of the odd one. Yeah. They just got a lot. They got a lot of outs.
They've got a lot of outs, Sydney, but they're just not playing that well. But even though Sydney are 0-3, you watch them play and you think they're not that far away. They're not going to have a shocking year. Whereas Hawthorn are looking really bad at the moment. But Sydney, I reckon they'll be able to turn.
See, that's what I can't figure out though. This happens to me every year where. It almost takes your brain a while to readjust to someone not being good anymore. If you're used to a team being good, you keep, like Hawthorn, I tipped them on the week, you keep tipping them, and then suddenly, it's like Freo last year, I suddenly got into about round 3-4 and go, I think they actually just suck.
Right.
I think they're just actually terrible. Good, yeah. They're not, it's not just, they're just not quite there.
I mean, when the end comes, it comes really fast, like it did with Brisbane, but it's you still don't believe it when it happens.
Nah.
You just don't believe it. You're just like, no. You know what? Hawthorn will be all right. But I don't know if they are going to be all right.
They're not okay. They're not okay.
No.
They need a lot of help.
And their rebuild's going to take a while with picks 86 and 94.
Well, I mean, there must be some St Kilda fans who are celebrating this. Because
they won twice on the weekend, basically.
Oh, my God. I mean, if Hawthorn finished last, St Kilda get a number 1 draft.
They've currently got the number...
How good is that?
They've currently got the number 1 draft pick. And there's a lot of people out there just hoping whoever they pick becomes an absolute superstar. Just because the gift that keeps on giving. Did you see the show? There was a bit of controversy or a lot of controversy actually. There was a couple of things happened. There was a brawl at the showdown
Yeah.
Did you see the footage of this? This was.
There's a shock that there was a brawl at the showdown.
Yeah, but not on the field.
I think there was a reenactment of the Ramsgate Hotel incident. It was all part of the history
it
and
was theatre. It was a history and theatre celebration.
That's right. It's like those Civil War reenactors. They get together and
as soon as they
reenact
hear
the
never
Ram-
tear us apart, it's like, here we go again, you know?
Everyone's like, imagine them arguing beforehand. Oh, you always get to be Rashido. But then, so I read a lot of things. People were saying, well, this has really lowered their opinions of Port Adelaide supporters. But do you think that's possible? Do you think people can really do that?
I mean, it'd be hard to lower them much. I mean, you'd still be in the same percentile. Like, you know, it'd be a ticker box. You might have been ticking the higher end of the box. Now it's the lower end.
That's right. Now, did you see the
I guess it's a step down from, like, the banana throwing, really, isn't it? Was that them? Was that the porter with the banana throws?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And then they had another one, this a woman, a 31-year-old woman. Now, this is, to me, interesting in that how this has been handled. So a 31-year-old Port fan basically did a tirade against a lot of the Crows players, including Eddie Betts on Facebook, in which she basically wrote in one of her posts, she wrote, go eat a banana and go back to the zoo with your family where you belong. Not the most subtle of insults,
Not
really.
the smartest thing.
She then was shocked that people didn't like that and got stuck into her. So the way she did it is she then did an interview with Channel 7 News last night saying how disappointed she was that she was receiving death threats. Now there's a few IQ points there where you go, there were such few life choices along the way to getting on the news that night.
I mean, firstly, you saw how the banana one went down.
Yeah.
That alone.
When do people kind of... This is like, to me, whenever someone dresses in blackface and then goes, well, how was I meant to know this was a thing?
Because the last 8 times it's happened during book week, it's been a thing.
Because it happens every year. Like, you know, you can set I change my smoke alarm batteries every time I have
a blackface incident.
That's how regular it's happening. Like, it's not like, you know, and then well, how am I meant to know? Like, I don't know.
It's the only way I know book week's on.
Yeah, just as you're about to go, I should do it this Halloween, you go, no, that's right. Another one just happened. But so once you do that, then she said she's getting death. Then she says she's getting death threats.
Well, that's an overreaction.
So what she does is she goes on live television to like give her name, her face, everything. And when asked why she did it, she goes, "Well, look, I just don't like them. I don't like Crow supporters, and I don't see why I have to change my opinion. And not all Indigenous people hate being called an ape."
What?
That was a response.
Hang on. Firstly,
on
rewind
TV.
that.
I mean, firstly, what? Like, firstly, I'm not sure how many Indigenous people you're talking to, love. Yeah. That would be my first thing. I feel like if you were talking to all Indigenous people,
you don't think she's like the sort that's gone and interacted widely across the community?
I mean, if the premise is that she's talked to like a considerable amount of Indigenous people, and her one thing she's got out of that is that some of them don't mind being called apes, I feel like she's missed the point of the general conversation.
Do you think whenever she meets an Indigenous person, just bumps into them, like they might be serving her somewhere, or she sees them at a social...
By the way...
First question, like, let me just ask you a quick question.
Look, I've got 3 questions I ask. Firstly, how you going? Secondly, what team do you support? And thirdly, now this one takes a little twist. I mean, I'm so disappointed every time when... I guess we're never going to be able to stamp out it entirely. But this game, it was why the Adam Goods thing just broke my heart, and why it happens every time is... Indigenous people, AFL has so much to be proud of when it comes to Indigenous people, and also the audience of AFL have so much gratitude that they should be giving to Indigenous people for the skills and role. The way our game has evolved, in part of where it came from, is Indigenous has been so influenced, particularly the skills and the different way of playing it by Indigenous people. It is one of the few industries, in fact, maybe only the other one would be rugby league, where an Indigenous person can not only be one of the top people in their industry. Like, name me another industry where an Indigenous person gets
they even get access to it,
or to earn the sort of money that football players play. It is a great tribute to both the game and the Indigenous players and what they've given to the game. It always just amazes me when people can't see that. Well, that's the thing that I am amazed by.
That's what got me really angry about the Adam Good stuff because I did the president's lunch up at Sydney the week he sat out. Remember, he sat out a week because he was just so over it and disappointed. And I did get up and do comedy, and the mood was, but it was pretty easy to do comedy because you just pointed out the ridiculousness of the situation of if you're in any debate and Andy Maguire and Shane Warne are on one side of it, it's pretty easy to decide where you should be. You know, you had all these, it was literally like they had all these white people coming out saying how the booing wasn't racist. And my point always was, and it's the same with this, like the booing of Adam Goods, to my thing is, let's even say that some of the people who were booing Adam Goods maybe before it even blew up were doing it for legit reasons, right? The minute a bunch of racists start doing the same thing you're doing, you start going,
might back off a bit here. Yeah.
This might not be what I want to do.
I have a piece about this on my special that's on Stan that people can watch.
I watched that the other night.
I talk about the Goodsy thing, and one of the, this is a visual joke for a podcast, but like essentially I'll describe it rather than that, but it's like somebody having their hand up in Nazi Germany going, I just want to go to the toilet. Once everybody else is booing, stop booing, because the truth of it is they're ruining your booing. Like, you're allowed to go to the football and boo a player because, I mean...
Yeah, for legit reasons.
Dwayne Russell, who I normally don't mind as a football commentator, but he has a bee in his bonnet about the booing. So now anytime someone is booed for other reasons, like Travis Cloak getting booed, for that kick and whatever, he'll kind of imply... He'll bring it back to the Adam Goods thing.
Yeah.
And I don't like it because... He's smart enough to know there's a difference between those two things. I had no problem with the Collingwood fans booing Travis Cloak, even though he plays for the Bulldogs now. That's the theatre and pantomime of football.
It's a very stupid thing, It's not people don't. It's not like It's not like the Cloaks have had generations of suppression.
Right.
Like that's any player that swaps, like Tom Boyd. But, there's no one at GWS to boo him.
Who cares enough?
But it's one of footy's great traditions of booing your ex-player.
I still boo Ron Barassi for going to Carlton.
But also even with the Goodsy thing, I was like, if people I boo him because he ducks for free kicks, and I said, just boo him when he ducks for a free kick.
Yeah.
And then boo him in that situation, and then at least make the racists have to identify when he's ducked for a free kick so they can do their boos.
Yeah, I know. But the thing that annoyed me about that was how badly the AFL handled it.
Oh, terribly.
Just so slow out of the blocks. And on that commission, I know, there were ones that thought he'd brought it on himself. And that's where it gets me, because you kind of think the AFL, for all the things that they do that bewilder and frustrate us, that area of Indigenous stuff, they were drag kicking and screaming there by Michael Long and a few others, but at least they sort of had embraced it. So then to not come out hard on that.
Also I think the thing that people miss is like this idea of like we like Eddie Betts because Eddie Betts, he doesn't confront us, doesn't challenge us, in the same way as Adam Goods does, right? And that was part of it. People just don't want to hear this stuff. They want, Adam Goods to be grateful that he's had this opportunity. And, but the thing about the Australian of the Year thing was, Adam, he got so much, blowback because of that. And I thought there was a mistake by the Australian of the Year people to do it while he was playing football. Because football is a tribal sport. The minute you give someone an individual honour in a tribal sport, it can't be for everyone, right? Wait until he finishes, give it to him then. Great idea. But anyway, he didn't run for it. You don't get
it's not like
you don't nominate yourself.
It's not like the Logies. You don't get your friends to vote for, you to be Australian of the Year.
Yeah.
He was asked to do it, and he accepted it, and he used it as an opportunity not to speak for himself, but to speak for people who were less fortunate than him, and that is what everybody who has a microphone should do with it. So I just thought it was disappointing, and it's sad that it keeps
the thing
going.
that got me about that, because I agree completely about, people find what he said confronting, and I'm like, if you read anything or know anything in history, nothing he said was even that controversial to me. That's what I just can't get my head around with a lot of this stuff is people say, it's very controversial, those opinions. And you go, they're not even, he's not saying every white Australian should leave he's just pointing out that
what happened,
which...
And to be honest, if you look at the language that he used around it, he was always actually very careful.
He was one of the most mainstream, pointing out the issues, but not in a the least threatening you'll get, like if from someone who's passionate about these issues.
He was absolutely what we should want from a leader of the Indigenous community, somebody that we should have supported and given an opportunity to go, you could be a great leader for an inspiration. And I'm sure he is within the community. You hear other Indigenous players talk about how much they respect Adam Goodes, but for all of us, you know.
But it's funny because I was writing a book recently, I was looking back at some old stuff, and you kind of think we're making progress on things. And then you realise sometimes, like, there was someone who I never thought would sort of have these opinions back when the apartheid issues were going on and they were banning the Springboks from touring here, or in the 70s there was the big complaints about it and the big protests, and cricket had to decide whether they would ban it, and Don Bradman was the one that said we won't play South Africa until they change their quotas, or not quotas, but not having anyone who's
policy,
African in the team. And so what but he wrote a series of letters where he was arguing it with some of the leaders of the protest movement, because they were writing to him saying, we hope you don't let the tour go ahead, which he ended up not. But he argued back, well, what about these issues? And he was actually having a legitimate argument. But here's the most conservative sports administrator of his time, someone who Howard and others have held up as, you know, he wrote this long letter back saying, well, basically all us whites are here because we wiped out and killed all the Indigenous people, and all our privileges and rights have come off the back of that. We're not that much better in some ways than what the South Africans did. Ours is just back in the past a little bit.
Right.
So here's this black armband view, as Howard would call it, in Don Bradman of all people. Yet now people kind of deny that's the case. You know, like if someone that conservative and that, you know, socially not progressive can have that view back, you know, in the 70s, now that would be seen as he's an outlier. And that's far more confrontational than anything Adam Goodes has ever said, yet he gets booed. So I just found the whole thing like a depressing setback. And then this lady, as funny as if you see the clip on the news, they're like central casting of what people would think a Port Adelaide supporter was if they were being unkind.
Right.
And I know not all Port Adelaide supporters are like this. Some of my best friends are Port Adelaide supporters.
No, they're not. No, they're not. There is not one person you know who breaks for Port Adelaide.
But
Maxine Spratt, her name is,
and you just look at it and go, really, is this where we're at? Are we just not making any steps on this? You know, and that's what gets me down about it.
Positive.
I mean, is maybe the thing that no one should give a shit what Maxine Spratt writes on her Facebook page. Do you know what I mean? Maybe that's not news. Maybe Maxine Spratt is not a professional commentator and is probably someone we shouldn't be hearing
She's
from.
not across the nuances of race and social history.
Let's institute the Spratt rule, which is you can talk about what you know about Maxine.
The Spratt report. That's what we need.
Now, did you see Jesse Hogan was caught filming, was filmed? I found this interesting more that this was a story in a way. He's been banned and he was at which sounded like a lot of fun, he was at the Hot Dub Wine Machine Dance Festival.
Oh, yeah, okay. Nice.
Which is,
or as they describe it, as a West Australian music festival, which surely is a contradiction in terms. But
so he said he was smoking a cigarette while he's been suspended, and they took photos of him, and it was all over the media about it, and I wasn't sure how to feel. I was a bit like, it's an invasion of privacy, but I was also like, come on, Jesse. You know, I expect you to run around and kick 100 goals this year.
Yeah,
what did you think of it?
I think sometimes if you're at a music festival and the pills haven't kicked in, they say have a smoke.
It'll accelerate the reaction.
What are you doing smoking, Jesse?
It's like, you're at a music festival, mate. There's so many more fun things you can do. You're in Western Australia. Did you not read the Gillard report?
I saw the photo and I thought, it reminded me of one of those, you see the photos, it's generally, I don't know, somebody from the Philippines, those guys who have got 100 lit cigarettes in their mouth.
Yeah.
You know, that would have impressed me.
Yeah.
But just the solitary Winnie Blue.
Yeah, well, Melbourne are going to use their number one draft choice for that smoking baby. Remember that guy? He's 16 unit. Now. And he's
one-on-one.
Yeah.
Cannot be, you can't,
not a lot of
you
endurance,
shift
but
him.
over the first couple of metres.
I just think it is hilarious. Like when I was interviewing Dane Swan on the weekend, he was saying he can't believe how lucky he is now that he's got out roughly at the time photos and social media around. He said, you know, and then, you know, the guys from the 80s, the stories they tell, you know, it does take, I do feel bad where they do. It's because, see, to me, there's an element where he's not, this is just him smoking a cigarette. It's not good for your health and all that sort of stuff, but it's not like he's hitting someone or doing something. He's not doing what most NRL players do or something like that. So
there's no bubbling involved. As far
no,
as we
so
can
what's
tell.
like? He's a human. Like it's stupid. He probably smokes, but
Right. Well,
who cares?
he probably doesn't smoke though. This is the thing.
Oh, exactly. Like
you know, a bunch of AFL footballers
yeah.
are what you would call a social smoker, which means on a night out or one thing they might have one cigarette.
And how many mates do you know that are like that? Or and when I used to go out occasionally, that was everyone does that. Like
yeah.
You know.
But also, if you're in a smoky nightclub all night, you have the equivalent of about one cigarette. Well, particularly back in the days.
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And but it's also one of those things where these guys are elite athletes. Like they still have to hit their times around the 10, and they have to hit all their marks and stuff. If you're doing that and you had one cigarette or whatever, then just don't think it's a real big deal, you know.
No, it's like that's the thing. Like he wouldn't be able to do what he did if he was on a pack a day or something.
But also, people are outraged about him having one cigarette when they're running a campaign publicly to get Hanbury back on the boots. Do you know what I mean? And one's actually as destructive as the other one, guys. But because ingrained in our culture is this idea of so they don't have a problem with a player going out on a Saturday night, I imagine, and having a couple of beers, right? If you had a beer there,
That's a footy tradition going back for generations.
Yeah,
but he has a cigarette. One cigarette, and people seem to think that that's a bigger problem. I think he probably isn't.
No, but people assume that he's instantly, to your point, a massive smoker. He's just chain smoking whenever he's not.
He's been he was moving pretty well.
They say he's one of the fittest guys of the club.
I was going to say this season he looks like he's moving better than ever. So
yeah.
Maybe the smokes have thinned him down.
Yeah.
They do say they're good for losing weight. Maybe that's his secret.
But you haven't noticed, Titus, at all the Melbourne games. On the back of the goalpost, there's an ashtray down at the members' end.
Well, maybe that was the problem the other week. He'd actually been off the smokes for a day. He was a bit grumpy and decided to punch someone. It's should have put a patch on.
That's right. Nicotine withdrawal.
Yeah, exactly.
That is harsh for him. They do cop everything now. You wouldn't want to be an AFL footballer for the scrutiny you get.
Well, Maxie Gawn, though, was a smoker. He's publicly talked about the fact that he only gave up a year or two ago. That he used to So
he's got cracking stories because he used to tell stories about I think eating KFC before training and stuff like that. So he was really it also has an impact to your point. If you're doing it all the time,
right?
You're going to not perform well. But if it's it's every now and then. I mean,
well, I was listening to Paddy Dangerfield being interviewed on the weekend, and he was talking about how he surfs on the morning of games, and I was like, if you weren't as good as Paddy Dangerfield, I imagine that your coach might have a problem with you going surfing before a big game, but. Yeah, I guess if you're Paddy Dangerfield and it's what works for you, then...
But can you imagine not having an outlet if you're doing stuff, you got to occasionally go and have a drink or something. You can't just always be... I would say that maritime AFL players will be kept in stables.
Right.
They'll have MMA, they'll have UFC streamed in and a PlayStation, and they won't be able to leave. Basically,
I think so. Isn't that what aren't you describing GWS? That's pretty much what happens up there. I believe they're all on feeding tubes.
There's nothing else to do.
Frankenstein's monster. That's what,
Oh well, it's been a pleasure having you on. Now we should plug your other podcast that you mentioned a few times. I was listening to Two Guys, One Cup.
Yes.
That's you preview and review every round, basically.
That's kind of the vague format of it, yeah. So we try to get one up midweek sometimes so that we can talk about what happened and what potentially.
And that's available where all good podcasts are sold, basically.
Yeah, exactly, all over the internet. But yes, it's Two Guys, One Cup AFL because just don't Google Two Guys, One Cup. Yeah, it's a whole different search history. And
it's dangerous.
It was a funny joke name for a podcast when both of our teams had won one premiership. But then the Bulldogs went and ruined the name of our podcast. So now it's just a weird one to Google.
And you've got Tofop and Fop.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So two there. They've been around a long time. And
Willosophy, which is hard to say.
Yeah.
No, they're all good. I recommend them all. I've subscribed to all of those. And you're also doing your comedy festival tour.
How many more shows you got to go, Will?
So, I'm there until the end of the festival, so a couple of weeks still of shows to
And I looked the other day because I'm going along to one of them, and the tickets are selling pretty quick, so if people want to go, get on, and there are some tickets available, but it's selling really well.
What I would say is I've already sold more tickets this festival than your regular GWS crowd.
So at least 5.
And I am, by the end of it, hopeful to be a kind of average North Melbourne crowd.
Before we let you go, I want to ask you, after the festival, what do you have a come down period or
Monday?
Yeah, Mad Monday.
We all dress as AFL players.
Going to the beach for 6 weeks. Do you kick back and go, if I don't see another empty stage with a solitary mic stand on it for a while, I'll be happy? Or do you go straight back into writing more? You're back to LA? What's your plans after this?
This is my biggest tour in years, so I'm actually I'm not even halfway through yet. So
Right.
I've done 4 weeks of it already, or no, 6 weeks already, but I don't finish until June 17 or something. So I've got, after Melbourne, I've got some regionals around Australia, and then like Darwin and Perth. And I'm in Perth. This is bad timing. The theatre I play in Perth, the Regal, is just down the road from the stadium, and the Bulldogs are playing West Coast while I'm on stage just down the road. So I will have to be careful
The
walking out of that
elimination
venue.
final replay.
Yeah, depending what happens after the game. I assume that most of the people in the room will not be football fans.
No, that's right. Oh, that'd be good. So people can go online. If you Google critically Wil,
I'll just go to comedy.com.au.
I love when people say, how will I find your podcast or this? And you go, Google.
Yeah. Also, you found this podcast.
Yeah.
If you found this one,
You'll find
You'll probably be able to
online.
find tickets. Yeah.
Probably underneath, now that I've been on this, when it says related podcasts,
That's right.
mine will probably just come straight up.
It's all networked. Oh, well, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thanks for doing it. Really appreciate
my
it.
pleasure.
Thanks, Will.
And let's hope that was a blip from the doggies this week. And
Yeah, let's hope so, right? Bark to bark, 2017.
Thanks very much. We'll see you later in the week.